They always said I was the responsible one, the steady one, the sister who gave without needing thanks. For years, I believed that was love keeping the peace, making room staying quiet. So when I didn't choose my little sister as my maid of honor, I knew I'd broken something sacred, but I didn't expect what came next. At the reception in front of everyone, she smiled, took a step toward the 5-tier wedding cake I had spent 6 months planning, and knocked it to the floor. $5,500, my grandmother's buttercream recipe, and every childhood memory we used to share ruined in 1 second. And still I didn't scream. I just walked away and started cutting ties. Not out of revenge. Out of relief. Because love isn't about carrying someone who keeps choosing to fall, and family isn't supposed to feel like drowning. I used to think fairness was something you grew into. That if you played the good daughter long enough, the world would eventually return the favor. Growing up in Visalia, California, fairness was something I watched happen to other people. Not in loud, obvious ways. It was subtle. It was my little sister Paige getting the last orange popsicle every single time. It was Mom whispering to me after Paige threw a tantrum in church. "Rachel, be the bigger one." "Okay, sweetie," I was always the bigger one. At 7 years old, I learned to apologize for things I didn't do because it made dinner quieter. At 10, I gave up the front seat of the car, even when I called shotgun first. At 12, I gave my sister my spot in the school talent show because she said she'd die of embarrassment. If I went before her, I don't think Paige ever said thank you. But I don't think she knew she was supposed to. She was the kind of child adults called spirited. She had curls that bounced when she ran, and she always ran. Through stores, through family events, through people's patience. But they adored her. They said she was creative, a free thinker. They called me the reliable one. Calm. Mature. The truth is I was just tired. I remember one summer, I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at an ice cream shop and one cleaning tables at a retirement home. I was 16. I saved every dollar because I wanted a used Honda Civic before senior year. Nothing flashy, just something that didn't smell like middle school gym socks. I came home one afternoon hands sticky from mopping up root beer and saw a red bow in the driveway. A brand new Mini Cooper. Not for me. For Paige, she was turning 17 and cried last week because she thought she'd have to share my car. The one I hadn't bought yet. The one I was still mopping floors for. She got the car. I got told I was being ungrateful, so I clapped. I hugged her. I smiled in every photo. And then I walked upstairs and cried into the pillow I'd bought with my own money. That's what being the older sister meant in my house. You made room. You made peace. You made it easier for everyone else to ignore the imbalance. I don't blame Paige entirely, not anymore. When you're told your whole life that you're special, that everything will be okay because someone else will fix it, you grow into that belief like it's your birthright. I blamed our parents more. Especially our mom. She never hid the fact that she wanted us to be close. Her version of close, though, always meant I needed to bend, like when she said Paige is sensitive, Rachel. Don't press her so hard when she forgets to say thank you. Or when she forgot my birthday dinner because she was with a boy she'd just started dating. Mom actually told me, Rachel, it's good she's learning to love someone. You already know how to be independent. I was 19. I had just cried into my tiramisu. Alone. The older I got, the more I told myself things would level out, that once I had a career, once I built a life outside our family, the scales would shift. I wouldn't need Mom's approval or Paige's acknowledgement. I'd have my own home, my own rules. And I did. By 28, I was a real estate agent closing my 6th home in Rancho Palos Verdes. I had a fiancé, a solid friend group, and a therapist who helped me stop apologizing before every sentence. But I also had Paige. At 23, she still lived at home, still job-hopped between unpaid internships and creative pursuits. Still forgot birthdays. Still called me when her tire light came on. Still acted like the world was made of safety nets. She didn't even have to see. I was her favorite net, at least I had been. Until the day I chose someone else to stand beside me on the most important day of my life. And the moment I said Amanda's name as my maid of honor, I realized just how far Paige would go to remind me of my place. That story didn't begin at the cake. It started with 1,000 small sacrifices and one simple truth. I was the sister who was always supposed to know better, but maybe for once, I didn't want to be. So I built a life where I didn't have to be. At 28, I was finally living on my own terms. My condo in Mission Hills overlooked the harbor, just close enough to hear the foghorns on quiet nights. I bought it with my own money after 3 years of 20 open houses a weekend and driving clients to Temecula and back just to close a deal. I loved that place. The hardwood floors creaked, the windows stuck a little in the summer, and the dishwasher made an odd clicking sound, but it was mine. Mine, not rented, not co-signed, not borrowed. I shared it with no one but myself. Well, and Jacob on weekends. Jacob was quiet in the best way. Not the type of man who interrupted or tried to fix me. He was a civil engineer, and the kind of steady that made you breathe slower just sitting next to him. We met at a client's housewarming where I had shown up in heels and he had tracked mud on the marble with his boots. He apologized and offered to replace the rug. I told him I hated the rug anyway. That was 3 years ago. Last fall, he proposed on the cliffs in La Jolla with a ring tucked inside a pocket of sourdough bread from our favorite bakery. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Our wedding was set for late spring. I wanted something simple, elegant, personal. Sunset ceremony, string lights, comfort food on vintage china. Amanda was the first person I told. Amanda had been my roommate at UC Santa Barbara, the kind of friend who became family without asking for permission. We survived finals week on saltines and caffeine, talked each other through internships, bad relationships, cross-country job rejections. When my grandfather died my junior year, she sat with me on the dorm hallway floor for 5 hours without saying a word. Just being there. She always just was. She had seen every version of me. From the overachieving high schooler terrified of letting anyone down to the exhausted realtor crying on her kitchen floor because the bank lost her loan paperwork. Amanda was the witness to all of it. So asking her to be my maid of honor felt less like a decision and more like a truth. We were sitting at a brunch spot in Hillcrest when I asked. She didn't cry, she didn't squeal, she just smiled that small knowing smile and said I would be honored. It felt like a moment. A solid, quiet, sacred kind of moment. And then I made the mistake of sharing it in the family group chat. I posted a photo of us clinking mimosa glasses, captioned just one word. Chosen. I didn't think twice. But I should have. Paige didn't reply. Not that day, not the next. But our mom did. She called me that night, voice low and careful, like she was about to ask for money or deliver bad news. She said, "Honey, I know Amanda's your best friend, but Paige always thought she would be your maid of honor." I was silent for a beat, then said, "She never said that." Mom sighed. "Well, sometimes girls just assume. She's your only sister." It would have meant a lot. I could feel the familiar weight rising in my chest, like I was being asked to apologize for my own heartbeat. I said quietly, "Amanda's earned it. She's been there for everything." Mom didn't argue. But her silence said everything. When Paige finally messaged 3 days later, it was just a heart emoji on the photo. No words, no congratulations. Just that sterile, passive little heart. But I knew her. That heart was a bullet wrapped in a band-aid. At first I convinced myself I was imagining it. That I was being paranoid. That she was just busy. But then the little signs started stacking up. She missed our first dress appointment, said her car had trouble. She skipped the makeup trial because of a freelance photo shoot she forgot to reschedule. She started texting our cousin Emily asking what color the bridesmaids were supposed to wear, even though I had already sent the mood board weeks earlier. Amanda noticed. She always noticed. She said one evening gently, "Paige is spinning something." "I can feel it." I nodded but didn't want to believe it yet. I wanted to give Paige the benefit of the doubt. Again. Because that's what I did. That's what I was trained to do. But deep down something in me knew. This wasn't about the wedding. Not really. It was about all the years Paige had quietly expected to be center stage in my life, and this time she wasn't. She wasn't the headline, she wasn't the confidant. She wasn't chosen. I had broken an unspoken contract. The one where I was always supposed to make space for her. And now for the first time I hadn't. The day the bridesmaid dresses arrived, I asked her to come try hers on. She showed up 45 minutes late carrying a coffee and chewing gum. I handed her the blush pink dress and she held it up like it had personally offended her. "This isn't really my color," she said flatly. "It's the one everyone's wearing." She glanced at me sideways. "You didn't even ask if I liked it." "It's a bridesmaid dress, Paige." "It's not a prom date," she shrugged and walked into the bathroom to change. A few minutes later, she opened the door and stood there arms crossed. "I don't want to walk behind Amanda." I blinked. "What in the lineup?" "I don't want to walk behind her." "Can we change the order?" My jaw tightened. "Number. That's the order." She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Of course it is." Then she turned and shut the door. I stood in the hallway of my own condo holding my breath. Not from shock, but from recognition. That moment wasn't new. That tone, that smile, that shift of power play wrapped in politeness, I had seen it all before. In smaller doses. But this time it wasn't a popsicle or a seat in the car. This time she was coming for something bigger. And I had just handed her the perfect stage to do it. It started small. The next morning Paige texted me, asking to reschedule her dress fitting. Again, she said she had a photo shoot that popped up last minute. She offered a vague sorry and a smiley face. I moved the appointment. Then she texted asking if we could reconsider the song choices for the ceremony. She had a friend who made acoustic remixes and thought he could add some flair to the processional. I told her thanks, but we already hired a string quartet. She didn't reply. That weekend, I overheard her whispering to our cousin Brianna at Grandma's birthday lunch. Something about how Amanda and I were just college friends and how blood should always come first. I didn't say anything. I just sliced the lemon cake and passed her a plate. Amanda knew something was off. She never said it outright, but she moved quieter when Paige was in the room. Watched me more closely like she was scanning for hairline fractures in my calm. I tried to stay neutral to let it pass to avoid turning a bruise into a break, but Paige didn't want peace. She wanted attention. At our joint makeup trial in Claremont, she showed up with a Pinterest board full of smoky eyes and matte lips. Our makeup artist, a kind woman named Trina, tried her best to explain we were going for soft and dewy, timeless and natural. Paige cut her off. "My skin doesn't photograph well with shine. And this shade of pink makes me look like I have a fever. Can we do more bronze?" Trina glanced at me. I gave her a nod. "Sure. Adjust hers." Afterward, Paige smiled like she'd won a game I didn't know we were playing. She took a selfie and posted it before she even left the chair, tagging the location and writing, "Could have been the maid of honor." Still the moment, the caption stung more than I expected. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I didn't want to feed the fire. Later that night, Mom called. She spoke slowly like she always did when she was trying to package disappointment in a ribbon. "Honey, I think Paige is feeling a little overlooked." I stared at the ceiling from my bed, counting the popcorn bumps to stay calm. "Mom, I chose Amanda because she's always shown up for me." It wasn't personal. There was a pause, then that familiar sentence, soft and sharp all at once. "She's your sister, and I've been hers for 28 years. Mom sighed. "You know, Paige has always seen herself in a special role. Maybe just talk to her. Include her more. She's sensitive." I bit my lip. "Being sensitive doesn't mean she gets to bulldoze every boundary I set." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I'm just asking you to think about it. That's all." The next day, Paige emailed the photographer directly to suggest we rearrange the bridal party photo layout. She claimed the lineup would be more symmetrical if she stood closer to me. I only found out because the photographer, confused, forwarded the message to me asking if the request was approved. I told her no. The order stands. When I confronted Paige, she shrugged and said she was just helping streamline the visuals. That I shouldn't be so uptight. She said the word uptight with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Amanda stayed quiet through all of it. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just stood behind me, solid as stone, always watching, always waiting for the temperature in the room to rise. One evening after a long day of errands, I found Paige in my condo kitchen eating leftovers straight from the container. She didn't ask if it was okay to be there. Didn't comment on how tired I looked. Just said offhandedly, "I've been thinking. I know you already picked Amanda, but it's not too late to switch. I mean, I'm your sister." People expected I dropped my keys on the counter and exhaled. It's not about what people expect, Paige. Then what is it about? It's about who's earned the space. Who's shown up. Who's been there every single time I needed someone, she scoffed. So, I get punished for not being your emotional crutch. I stared at her. You're not being punished. But you're also not entitled to a title just because we share a last name. Her mouth twitched. Then she set down the fork and leaned against the fridge. I just think it's sad that you value some college friendship over family. I crossed my arms. What's sad is that you think it's a competition. The room fell quiet. After a long moment, looked away and said softly, "You've always made me feel like I'm less number. You've always assumed that being the youngest meant you deserved more. And now that I'm not handing it to you, you're panicking." She didn't respond. She grabbed her bag and walked out. That night, Amanda texted me, still breathing barely. She sent a heart. No commentary. No advice. Just the quiet reassurance of someone who understood that sometimes survival meant standing still while everyone else demanded movement. I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling again, remembering all the moments I had bent myself into. Someone more palatable, more agreeable, more easy. I had outgrown that shape, and Paige could feel it. That's why she kept pushing. Because the one thing harder than being ignored was being irrelevant, and for the first time in her life, Paige was no longer the center of my orbit, and she was going to make sure I felt every inch of the distance. By Tuesday morning, it wasn't just Paige making noise. She posted a photo of herself in a pale blue bridesmaid dress with the caption, "When you're pushed aside from the role that was always yours and have to smile anyway." It took about 20 minutes before the comments started piling up. Aunt Lacey asked, "Wait, aren't you the maid of honor?" Uncle Dave posted a confused face emoji. Then came Cousin Monica with a too-long reply about family dynamics and being overlooked. Even worse was Aunt Nancy chiming in with one sentence that sent a chill straight through me. I thought Paige was going to be the maid of honor. That was it. A single comment. And suddenly my inbox was a war zone. I got 6 texts before noon. 3 were from extended family asking if something happened. 2 were from Jacob's side wondering if I needed help with damage control, and 1 was from Mom. Just said we need to talk. I stared at it for a solid minute before replying, "I'm working. Call you tonight." That night, she didn't wait for small talk. "Rachel, I know you're trying to be fair, but this is hurting your sister." I held the phone against my shoulder while folding laundry. "Mom, I'm not doing this to hurt her. I didn't say you were. I just think maybe she assumed she'd have a special role. That's normal. She's your sister. So that automatically makes her entitled to the title mom side. The way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. It's not about entitlement, it's about meaning, about connection. This is your wedding. Don't you want it to reflect your whole family? It already does. That's the problem. I chose someone who's been by my side consistently. That is my version of family." She went quiet. Then finally said, "I just don't want there to be bad blood at your wedding. Can you at least think about a compromise?" I hung up the phone and sat on the floor staring at the pile of clean towels. Compromise. That word always meant me giving up something so someone else could feel better. Later that evening, Amanda and I were going over the ceremony schedule on Zoom. She noticed the tension in my face before I said a word. "What's going on?" Paige's post. My mom's call. Family politics. It's all boiling over now. Amanda leaned back in her chair. "Of course it is. Because you chose yourself. And people aren't used to you doing that." I let out a shaky breath. Maybe I should have just named her from the start. Maybe it would have saved all this mess. She tilted her head slightly. "You know that's not true. The mess would have looked different, but it still would have come. Because it's not about the title. It's about her needing to be centered. And she's not." I rubbed my temples. I just wanted this to be simple. Clean. not a circus. Amanda looked at me for a long moment before saying, Rach, love isn't a duty. You don't owe anyone that spot. Especially not someone who shows up only when it serves them. That line stuck with me. Love isn't a duty. I replayed it in my mind all night. The next morning, I saw a news story page posted on Instagram. A boomerang of her spinning in front of a mirror in a dark red gown. Caption: not the maid of honor dress, but maybe it should have been. There were more comments this time, some supportive, some passive-aggressive. Some I didn't recognize, people I hadn't spoken to in years, messaging me to ask if Paige was okay. She's fine, I typed out, then deleted. Instead, I just turned off my notifications. At work that afternoon, my colleague Jamie leaned over during lunch and said, Hey, I saw your sister's post. Everything all right? I forced a smile. Wedding drama. You know how it goes. She nodded slowly. Family's complicated. It is, but complicated didn't mean I had to keep shrinking myself to fit someone else's fragile ego. That weekend, Mom sent me a picture of Paige as a toddler wearing a flower crown, no message. Just the photo. I knew what she was trying to do. Remind me of who Paige was when we were small. Before the wedges between us hardened. Before expectations became demands, but I wasn't planning a wedding for the past, I was planning it for the version of myself I had become. And in this version, I didn't mistake guilt for love, I didn't confuse obligation with closeness. Later, that night, Amanda sent me a voice memo. Just remember, you're not wrong for choosing what brings you peace. You're not cruel for setting boundaries. You're finally being honest. I sat with her words, I let them wash over the noise. Because deep down I knew Paige was going to keep escalating. But I also knew this, I didn't need everyone to agree with my decision, I just needed to stand by it. And that meant staying still while the rest of them spun in circles trying to pull me back to a place I had finally grown out of. It started with the makeup trial. We had set up an appointment for the bridal party at a studio downtown, one of those upscale places with glowing mirrors and champagne flutes waiting at the entrance. I had picked a soft, natural look for the bridesmaids. Dewy skin, muted tones, nothing too harsh. Paige showed up 30 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a matcha latte. She dropped her purse on the chair, looked at the artist, and said, I'll need something more glam. Full contour. Smoky eye. Maybe a wine lip. The artist blinked. I gently interjected, we're keeping it soft for everyone. It'll match the tone of the ceremony. Paige gave me a tight smile. I know. I just don't want to blend into the background. I caught Amanda's eyes in the mirror. She didn't say anything, just raised a brow. The artist hesitated before nodding and beginning. But by the time Paige stepped down from the chair, she looked more ready for a red carpet than a vineyard wedding. She turned to me and said, It's okay if I stand out a little. You're the bride. No one can outshine you. Right? I didn't answer. At the next walkthrough at the venue, Paige brought a printout of the ceremony order. She had highlighted her name and moved it closer to the front of the processional right behind Amanda. I noticed it while reviewing with the coordinator. This isn't the version I sent. Paige shrugged. Oh, I thought I'd just move myself up. I mean, I've known you longer than Amanda, obviously. I paused, fingers tightening around the clipboard. That's not how it works. The order is already finalized. She crossed her arms. You know, most people wouldn't treat their own sister like an afterthought. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not without saying something I'd regret. Later that week, Amanda texted me a screenshot. It was an email from the DJ confirming a new addition to the reception speeches. Apparently, Paige had emailed him herself and asked to be added to the list. Not just as a toast. As the closing speech, I called her immediately. What are you doing? She sounded innocent, just thought it would be nice to say something. You know, since I'm your only sibling. You didn't ask me, I didn't think I had to. Her tone had a sharpness to it now. I hung up without saying more. Amanda called me an hour later. We need to get ahead of this, set clear roles. Or she's going to keep rewriting your wedding. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. It's like she's trying to inject herself into every spotlight possible. And when that fails, she makes her own. Amanda exhaled. She's not used to playing supporting roles. Especially not to you. We sat in silence for a while. The following Sunday we had a family dinner. Just the four of us. Mom made lasagna. Dad opened a bottle of red and tried to lighten the mood with bad puns. Halfway through the meal, Paige put down her fork and looked straight at me. I thought you'd understand what it means to be the younger sister. To feel like you finally have your moment. And then to be told you don't matter that much. Mom glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable. Dad stared at his plate. I set down my glass. Paige, you matter. This isn't about mattering. It's about roles, choices. You didn't ask me about any of this. You just assumed. She laughed, but it was bitter. I assumed because that's what sisters do. Support each other, celebrate each other. But I guess your version of family doesn't include me at the top. I didn't say anything. There was no use. She already had her narrative. I got up to help clear the plates. In the kitchen, Mom followed and whispered, "She's hurting. Just try to see that I wiped my hands on a towel. She's not just hurting. She's making this harder for everyone. Especially me." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. There was a familiar weight on my chest, a feeling I had known since childhood. The quiet demand that I make things easier for everyone else. But this time I wasn't 10 years old watching my sister open gifts while I sat quietly with folded hands. I was a grown woman planning her wedding. And for once, I wasn't going to hand over the pen just so someone else could rewrite the ending. There was one thing I had never compromised on. The cake, not because it was expensive, though it was. Not because it would be displayed in every photo or because guests would post about it. It was because of Grandma Ellie. She used to say every celebration should taste like love, and her champagne buttercream recipe was how she showed it. She made it for birthdays, graduations, the day I got into UCSB. It was light, not too sweet, with just a whisper of citrus and bubbles. Like something joyful dancing across your tongue. When Jacob proposed, it was the first thing I knew I wanted. Not a replica. Not inspired by. The real thing. I found a bakery in North Park that specialized in heirloom recipes. I brought them the handwritten card with Grandma's faded notes smudged with flour and thyme. We spent 6 months perfecting it layer by layer. Every Monday, I'd go in with a new idea and Chef Daniela would smile and say, "You don't want a cake. You want a story." She wasn't wrong. Each tier had a meaning. The bottom one was vanilla Earl Grey with pressed violets, a nod to the bookstore where Jacob and I had our first conversation. The next was pistachio cardamom for the night we cooked together on the floor of my old studio apartment. Then came the classic champagne buttercream, Grandma's legacy. The fourth was lemon raspberry because Jacob proposed with a basket of those exact fruits on a hiking trail. And the top, a miniature chocolate piano like the one in his parents' living room where we shared our first kiss. It was 5 tiers, 5 chapters. The one thing I was most excited to reveal. One night, Amanda and I were folding programs in my living room and she asked me if I was nervous about anything. I looked up from the ribbons. Only the cake. I need it to be perfect. It's the only part of the wedding that's for me and her. She knew I meant Grandma. Amanda nodded. It will be. She'd love it. I smiled, but my throat felt tight. If there's anything she's watching from up there, it's that cake. The tasting day arrived on a rainy Friday. Jacob came with me along with Amanda and her husband. Chef Daniela had laid out every layer on silver trays. We sat by the window tasting slices like we were judges on a baking show. I cried on the first bite. Not because it was flawless, but because it tasted like memory. Like quiet mornings and warm hands and birthday candles flickering on a porch table. I texted my mom and invited her and Paige to the final tasting, but Paige didn't show. Mom said she had a headache. I tried again the next week. No response. Eventually, I asked Paige directly while we were at a dress fitting. "Hey, are you coming to the bakery next week? It's the final consult before the big day." She pulled a strap tighter and shrugged. "Don't think so. I'm not really into cake stuff." I paused. "It's kind of important to me." She looked at me in the mirror and said, "I just don't get why it's such a big deal. It's cake." I nodded slowly and didn't push. Because what could I say that she'd never understand what it meant to create something beautiful out of memory or to honor someone who had loved us in silence when no one else had time that weekend. Mom called. She wanted to ask about the rehearsal dinner seating chart but ended up circling back to the cake. "Paige said you were upset with her." I wasn't. I just hoped she'd care. It's hard for her, honey. She doesn't always know how to show up. I bit back a sigh. That's the difference. I always showed up even when no one asked. After we hung up, I sat in the dining room and looked at the mock-up chef Daniela had emailed me. A 5-tier masterpiece with watercolor florals, tiny gold brushstrokes, and the words "we began with" carved in white chocolate on the base. I printed it out and tucked it into my planner right behind my vows. Amanda texted me that night. "The cake is stunning. I'm proud of you." I typed back, "I just hope nothing goes wrong." And for a split second, I wondered if that was tempting fate. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed of. Jacob's vows made even my Uncle Rob cry. The breeze off the La Jolla cliffs picked up just enough to flutter my veil at the perfect moment. We held hands under the arch that Amanda and I had built ourselves the week before, draped with pale garden roses and white anemones. For one breathless hour, it all felt weightless. Like my whole life had finally caught up to where it was supposed to be. After the ceremony, we moved into the reception space, a soft-lit tent overlooking the ocean. Our first dance ended with laughter as Jacob twirled me too fast and I almost toppled. I didn't mind. The music, the light, the clinking glasses, it all blurred into this warm hum. Paige was laughing too. She floated around the room in a champagne-colored dress, her hair curled just enough, her smile fixed like it belonged in a bridal magazine. For someone who had spent the past 6 months acting like I had committed an unforgivable betrayal, she was fine. Too fine. Amanda leaned in during dinner and whispered, "Has she spoken to you at all?" Today I shook my head, glancing across the table where Paige was showing a guest something on her phone number. But she hugged Jacob like they were best friends. Amanda didn't laugh. "I don't like it. She's being too polished." "That's not her." I tried to brush it off. Maybe this was her version of peace. Maybe she had decided to be the bigger person. Maybe in her own way, she was showing up after all. I told myself all of that even when it didn't sit right. It was after the father-daughter dance that Amanda tugged my arm again. We were heading toward the photo booth when she paused, eyes narrowing. "Wait. Don't look now." But Paige is over there talking to one of the catering staff. By the cake table, my stomach dropped. I turned slowly, pretending to adjust my dress. Across the tent, Paige was indeed speaking to a young guy in a vest and bow tie, a silver tray in his hand. She was smiling, but not in a party kind of way. Her eyes flicked toward the cake table twice while she spoke. Amanda muttered, "I don't like that look." We walked toward the bar skirting the edge of the tent, eyes locked on her. The server nodded at something she said and walked away. Paige picked up her glass of Prosecco, took a sip, and laughed at something a bridesmaid said nearby. I turned to Amanda. "You think she'd actually—" "Yes, she would." I didn't argue. I started walking faster, heels crunching softly against the floor. The cake table was about 15 feet away, tucked under a garland of fairy lights near the back of the tent. 5 tiers of memory and love and late nights spent tweaking sugar ratios. As I reached the center of the floor, someone grabbed my elbow. "Congratulations, Rachel. Everything looks so beautiful." It was Mrs. Halpern, our old neighbor. She hugged me tightly, and I murmured a thank you, trying to step away politely. But she held on, launching into a story about her niece's wedding in Arizona and the heat stroke that took out 2 flower girls. I smiled, nodded, half listened, all while my eyes stayed trained on Paige. She had set down her drink. She was walking slowly, deliberately toward the cake. Amanda appeared at my side, phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. "We need to move." I gently extricated myself from Mrs. Halpern, apologizing. Amanda and I started toward the cake table just as Paige stepped around the back of it. She didn't look rushed. She wasn't hiding. She bent slightly, one hand bracing against the table's edge. I called out, "Paige." She turned, and then it happened. Her hand swiped too wide. Or maybe it wasn't a swipe at all. Maybe it was just a bump, an accident, a slip. But the bottom of the cake wobbled. Just enough. Just once. "Oops," that's what she said, "oops." The sound of sugar and fondant cracking filled the air like a gunshot. Gasps scattered around the tent. My mother stood frozen near the gift table, her mouth open. I ran. Not fast enough to catch it. Not fast enough to stop it. The cake lean tilted and then surrendered to gravity. The top 3 tiers crashed down, first splitting apart in a slow, sickening collapse. The piano shattered into chocolate rubble. Raspberry filling bled into the silk tablecloth like a wound. Paige backed away, hands raised. Oh no. I didn't mean to. Camera clicked. Then another, someone whispered. Was that on purpose? Amanda stood beside me, breathing hard. Rachel, I couldn't speak. I couldn't cry. I just stared at what was left of Grandma's legacy of 6 months of work of every flavor that had ever meant something to me. The servers rushed forward. One of them picked up a shard of fondant with trembling fingers. Paige stepped aside, still holding her hands out like the innocence could be seen in her palms. She looked at me and said, "It was an accident." But she was smiling when she said it, just barely. But I saw it, and I would never unsee it. It didn't fall all at once. The top layer tilted first, a slow lean like a tree in the wind. Then the second and third layers followed in a sickening cascade, champagne buttercream smearing across the polished wood floor of the reception hall. The gold-dusted sugar roses shattered. The base cracked open, its hand-piped script sinking into itself like wet paper. There was a single sharp intake of breath from someone near the buffet. Then silence. No one moved. Lily stood there holding a half-empty glass of rosé, one heel slightly raised as if she'd just stepped back. Her voice came light and dismissive, almost chipper. Oops. I guess I really should have watched my step. Her tone wasn't embarrassed. It wasn't remorseful. It was smug. I didn't react. I couldn't. My breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat. I stared at the cake, what was left of it, feeling the way a person might if they watched a house they'd built for years collapse in an instant. My mom rushed to my side. Her hand wrapped tightly around my wrist like I was about to do something reckless. Sweetheart. It's probably an accident. Please. Don't make a scene. People are still eating. Make a scene. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Her eyes darted around the room, checking who was watching. Her voice had dropped to a whisper, like the real catastrophe here was that someone might hear us talk about it. Across the room, Amanda started toward us, her face a mask of disbelief. I could see her lips forming words, her head shaking slowly. But I couldn't hear anything. Not the music, not the chatter, not the clink of glasses. I knelt. My dress folded around me, layers of ivory pooling on the sticky floor. I reached out and touched the soft collapsed sponge. Champagne and raspberry jam stained my fingertips. My thumb brushed the silver ribbon I had insisted on because it matched the trim of my grandmother's photo frame. It was buried under the bottom tier. Flattened. Behind me, someone let out a low, uncomfortable cough. I stood up slowly. Lily was watching me. She wasn't pretending anymore. Her smile had disappeared, but not out of shame. It was the kind of look people give when they finally say what they've been meaning to say for years. Her face said it all. You should have picked me. This is what you get. Amanda reached me and whispered. You okay, number? But I nodded anyway. I took the linen napkin from the table and wiped my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my bouquet across the room like some movie bride. I looked at Lily and smiled. Thank you for coming. Her expression faltered for half a second. That was all I needed. The rest of the evening played out like a movie in slow motion. Jacob never left my side. Amanda coordinated a quiet rearrangement of dessert. Cupcakes from the backup box were served with extra berries, and no one complained out loud. My dad tried to say something about the cake but trailed off mid-sentence when I turned away. I didn't talk to Lily again that night. Later, after most of the guests had left and the room was nearly empty, I sat on one of the velvet chairs near the window. Amanda joined me with 2 glasses of leftover champagne. You're handling this better than anyone I've ever seen, she said quietly. I shook my head. This wasn't just a cake. I know. It was 5 tiers of memories. My grandmother's frosting recipe, the way Jacob looked when he tasted the lemon layer for the first time, the hours I spent sketching it with the pastry chef, making sure every element told our story. The tiny sugar books for our love of reading. The small piano keys for the night we met. It was more than flour and eggs. It was what I thought family honored. Amanda handed me the glass. You honored it, Rach. She didn't. That's on her. I sipped quietly. The city lights shimmered through the window. Somewhere in the back I could hear Lily laughing with a cousin like nothing had happened. Like the moment that broke something sacred wasn't even worth her attention. And suddenly I felt nothing. Not rage, not pain. Just a clean, terrifying stillness. The kind that comes when you realize a line has been crossed and there's no walking back. I used to think family could stretch around hurt. That love could absorb pettiness, jealousy, even betrayal if you just held on long enough. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let go. I didn't say goodbye to Lily that night. I didn't know her that. I had said enough with my silence. And as I gathered the hem of my dress and walked out into the cool San Diego night hand in hand with Jacob, I knew one thing for certain. Something ended that evening. And it wasn't just the reception. The hotel suite was quiet except for the rustle of my dress as Jacob unzipped it gently. I stepped out of the satin and tulle and into a pair of soft cotton shorts and his college sweatshirt. We had barely spoken since we left the reception. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had already been said without words. He watched me as I walked to the desk, opened my laptop, and waited for it to boot. You sure you want to do that tonight? He asked, settling on the edge of the bed. I nodded without looking up. It won't take long. I had always kept a folder labeled family accounts. It wasn't anything dramatic. Just a quiet little system I built over the years. Passwords to shared utilities when Lily couldn't pay on time. My cosigner documents for the apartment she applied for downtown. A small savings account I had funded each month to help her eventually move out on her own. The numbers blinked back at me calm and clear. I withdrew $2,000 from the moving fund and transferred it back into my own account. Then I opened the lease email chain and typed a short message to the property manager. Hi Sharon, as of today I would like to remove myself as co-signer from Lily Morgan's lease. Please let me know what next steps are required. Simple. Respectful. Final. I clicked send and leaned back in the chair. Jacob came over and placed a glass of water next to me. I don't want to push. But is this something you'll regret in the morning? No, I said quietly. This isn't revenge. This is me ending something that should have ended a long time ago. He nodded. He didn't argue. He just placed a hand on my shoulder and left it there. I stared at the screen a little longer. I had always thought love meant stepping and catching the pieces when someone shattered, patching over the parts that hurt, even when they kept slicing me open. I called it loyalty. But it was just fear dressed up in a prettier word. Fear that if I stopped giving, they'd stop seeing me. Fear that if I didn't help, they wouldn't stay, but they hadn't really stayed. They just took up space and left the rent to me. I logged out of every shared account. Cut my name from every corner it didn't belong. And for the first time in years, my digital life felt clean. I shut the laptop and placed it gently in the drawer. Jacob kissed my forehead. You did the right thing. I crawled into bed beside him and turned off the lamp. My phone was still buzzing somewhere in my purse, but I left it there. Whatever came through could wait. Morning light slipped through the sheer curtains, painting gold across the room. I made us coffee in the little hotel machine, poured it into the ceramic cups they left for honeymooners, and sat on the balcony with my feet tucked under me. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Still, there was no emergency to solve, no damage to spin, no apology to script. Just me holding space for myself. Jacob stepped out with his mug and sat next to me. Still not turning your phone on? Nope, good. He smiled. Keep it off as long as you want. You don't owe anyone your peace. I leaned into him, letting the silence stretch. Somewhere inside, I had expected a pang of guilt, a whisper that I'd gone too far. That I'd let one broken cake push me over an edge I couldn't return from. But it didn't come. Because it wasn't just the cake. It was the accumulation. Years of being the cushion. The safety net. The one who made room even when there wasn't any left. I had given Lily my time, my money, my voice, my credit score. I had softened every corner for her until I didn't recognize where she ended and I began. But last night, in front of everyone, she had shown me exactly where she stood. And I believed her. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her explanation. I didn't need one more cycle of she didn't mean it or you know how she gets. What I needed was this. To stop making space for people who didn't value the gift. To turn off the valve. And let them feel the difference. The phone vibrated for almost a full minute when I finally turned it back on. I watched the screen light up with text after text, each one piling on top of the next like an avalanche that had been waiting to fall. From Mom, Lily was denied the apartment. They said her cosigner backed out. What happened? From Dad, sweetheart, can you call me when you have a moment? It's about your sister. From Lily, you can't just drop this on me. They said I need to pay a deposit I don't have. Are you seriously doing this? From Lily again, I thought you said you'd always have my back. Guess that was just another lie. And then the third, I'm being pushed out of the world here. Do something. I sat on the edge of our bed, phone in hand, heartbeat steady. I had expected anger. Accusations. But the desperation in Lily's messages hit different. I called Dad. He picked up immediately. Hi honey, glad you called. Your mom and I are trying to figure out what's going on. Lily's panicking. I'm aware, I said calmly. There was a pause. A hesitation in the way he cleared his throat. I got an email from the university. They're withholding her diploma. She still owes a few thousand in unpaid tuition. I let that sit for a moment. Was that supposed to be my cue to fix it? I asked him what he wanted me to do. He sighed. She's just struggling. And I think what happened at the wedding might have pushed her further. So you saw it then, I said. The cake. He didn't respond at first. I watched her do it, he admitted eventually. The angle I was at. She wasn't bumped. She wasn't distracted. She was looking right at it when her elbow went out, and you didn't say anything. He let out another breath. It was your day. I didn't want to make it worse. But it's okay to make it mine to fix, I said softly. Again. I heard the guilt settle into his silence. I'm not calling to argue, Dad. I'm calling because I need to know something. What is it? If no one bails her out this time, what happens? More silence. Not defensive, just new. He said he didn't know. I told him that maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. That maybe Lily has never learned to swim because she's never had to feel the water rise around her. He didn't disagree. We ended the call quietly. No yelling, no sides taken. Just a father and a daughter standing at the edge of a change neither of them could undo. I didn't reply to Lily's texts. Not out of spite, but because I no longer saw myself as the net beneath her fall. Later that afternoon, I drove to a small cafe near Balboa Park and sat outside with Amanda. She hadn't brought it up, but I could see the question in her eyes. You okay? Better than I thought I'd be. She nodded. Sipped her iced tea. They're going to keep pushing, you know. Until they realize you're not the same, Rachel. I know. What will you do if she shows up? I shrugged. Invite her in if she wants to talk. Close the door if she comes to blame. Amanda smiled softly. You're learning to choose you. I looked up at the trees swaying in the late summer light. Everything felt clearer. Like the years of fog and noise were finally burning off. That night, Jacob found me on the couch scrolling through old photos. Me and Lily as kids. Halloween costumes, family barbecues, beach trips. Do you miss her? He asked. I shook my head. I miss the version of her I thought could grow beside me. That version never existed. And now, maybe for the first time, I wasn't mourning that loss. I was accepting it, letting the fantasy go, letting myself be free. The next morning I received one last message from Lily. Fine. I'll figure it out on my own. Don't expect me to come crawling back when you finally realize what you've done. I read it once and then deleted it. No reply, no explanation, no defense. Because I wasn't building a case anymore, I was building a life. One boundary at a time. I didn't answer right away when my mother asked to come over. I needed a moment to brace myself to step into that house again, not as the sister or the daughter who bent, but as the woman who had stopped doing so. She brought lemon bars like she used to when I was in college, as if sugar could dilute memory. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, eyes already welling before the first sentence left her lips. Lily's in trouble. She's getting eviction notices. Her credit's tanked. She can't even register for next semester because she still owes $3,000 in back tuition. I stayed quiet, not to be cruel, but to let the weight of her words hang in the air without rushing to catch them. Then she said it. We were wondering if maybe you could help. The word we stung. I asked gently why Lily hadn't come herself. She's embarrassed. You know how proud she is. She's just lost her footing. She's still your little sister. I took a breath. Mom, I know you mean well, but I've helped. For years. Quietly, consistently. And I never asked for anything back. But this time I'm not just refusing out of anger. I'm saying no because it's the only way she'll learn to stand on her own. She shook her head. But this isn't the time for tough love. She's at rock bottom. Maybe rock bottom is what she's needed, I said. You raised us to believe family means showing up, but that doesn't mean covering for every choice someone refuses to own. Before she could answer, my dad walked in from the back patio. I hadn't seen him since the wedding. He looked older somehow, not just in face, but in posture, as if the events of that day had finally made him carry his years. He sat down and I noticed how he didn't look at my mom, but at me. I saw what happened, Rachel. I saw how she knocked that cake over and pretended it was nothing. I didn't say anything that night because I didn't want to ruin the rest of your day. But I won't pretend I didn't see it. My mom looked shocked. Her voice cracked. You think she did it on purpose? He didn't flinch. I know she did. Then he turned to me. If I help her, it'll be under one condition. She gets a job, starts paying something, anything. She learns how to handle her own money. Because this isn't about blame anymore. It's about growing up. I nodded. That's all I needed to hear. An hour later, Lily came. She stood at the threshold of my door like a child who wasn't sure if she'd be invited in. Her voice was small. Can we talk? She didn't sit. Just paced the rug near my coffee table like her feet didn't know whether to stay or flee. I messed up. I know I did. I thought you would always catch me. I kept my eyes steady. I always did. Until I couldn't anymore. She looked down. Mom said you might help. I didn't speak right away. Instead, I handed her a printed letter I had written the night before. Not out of spite, but because I knew if I spoke the words I'd soften them too much. She unfolded the page. Lily, I am not angry. I'm tired. I'm not punishing you. I'm drawing a boundary that's long overdue. I have loved you through every bad decision, every tantrum, every moment you chose not to see me. But love isn't the same as enabling. I will not co-sign leases, cover tuition, or transfer money anymore. I will not explain your behavior to our parents. I will not shrink so you can feel larger. If you want to change, truly change, you can. And I hope you do. But it has to come from you. Not because I'm threatening to walk away, but because you're finally ready to walk forward. She folded the letter slowly, her face unreadable. So that's it, that's love, I said. She didn't cry, she didn't yell. She just stood there nodding a little, then walked to the door. As she opened it, she paused. If I try, like really try, would you still talk to me? Always, I said. But this time I'll be walking beside you. Not in front. She left quietly. No dramatic exit, no slammed door. Just a silence that didn't feel cruel for once. I stood there for a long time, holding that silence like a gift I didn't know I'd earned. Not victory. Not revenge. Just peace. And for the first time in years, I slept with both eyes closed. The sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows that morning was unusually soft, almost deliberate. I stood in front of the sink, cradling a cup of coffee, watching steam curl and disappear into the quiet. It had been 6 months since the wedding. 6 months since the cake. Since the silence, since the shift. The house Jacob and I had moved into wasn't extravagant. It was a 2-story Spanish-style home in a quiet cul-de-sac in Santa Clarita, just far enough from the chaos but close enough to feel alive. We had painted the walls ourselves. Burned a few dinners figuring out the oven. Turned the guest room into a reading nook we both used more than we admitted. Tonight, for the first time, we were hosting a dinner. Amanda arrived first wearing her signature wrap dress and carrying sunflowers wrapped in brown paper. She hugged me at the door without a word and handed over a bottle of Malbec we both had discovered on a weekend trip years ago. "I miss this," she said. Your cooking. Your overly dramatic playlists. You mean the ones that make you cry halfway through the salad course? Exactly those. We were setting the table when the doorbell rang again. Jacob answered it this time. My parents stood in the doorway a bit uncertain, like guests in a house they weren't sure they were still welcome in. But my mother smiled and held out a peach cobbler wrapped in foil. "It's from scratch," she said quickly. "I didn't want to bring anything store-bought." "Thank you, Mom. Come in." My father hugged me, tentative but warmer than usual. His eyes scanned the living room, the photos on the wall, the tiny details of the life I had built without needing to ask permission. And then came Lily. She walked in with that same familiar tilt of her chin, but something was different. Her hair was shorter, darker, styled in a neat bob. She wore a simple blue blouse tucked into tailored pants and carried herself with a poise I hadn't seen before. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize. Tall, kind-eyed, with a steady presence. "This is Daniel," she said. "We met in class. Personal finance." "Hi," I said, shaking his hand. "Welcome." He smiled. "She talks about you a lot." I raised an eyebrow. "All good things, I hope." "Mostly." He laughed, and Lily gave him a playful nudge. We sat around the table, the mismatched chairs pulled in from other rooms, napkins folded as best as I could manage. The roast chicken came out slightly overdone, the potatoes were perfect, and the salad dressing was too garlicky. No one cared. The conversation started slowly, cautious, like people testing the temperature of a pool before jumping in. Amanda carried most of it at first, telling stories from her new apartment downtown, her latest court case, a yoga retreat she hated but paid for anyway. Then Jacob chimed in about the renovation at his firm, and even my father added a few comments about the real estate market, but the moment that held the most weight came quietly. Lily set her fork down and glanced around the table. "You know, I didn't think I'd say this 6 months ago, but I'm happy. Like, really happy." She looked at me. "That spreadsheet you made me 3 years ago, I printed it again. I update it every week now. Turns out tracking expenses is weirdly satisfying." Daniel grinned. "She makes pie charts, color-coded." "That sounds terrifying," I said, laughing. "It kind of is," he replied. We all chuckled, and for a moment the old tension that used to live between us was replaced by something softer. Then my mother cleared her throat. Her eyes found mine, and her voice was unsteady but firm. "I need to say something. To you, Rachel." The room quieted. I was wrong. About so many things. I pushed you to give, and I didn't see the weight it put on you. I thought I was protecting Lily, but really I was avoiding the hard truth that she needed to stand on her own. You were right. And strong. And I should have said it sooner. I didn't say anything for a beat. I just looked at her. At the woman who had for so long been the silent judge in the room of my life. She wasn't a villain, just human. Flawed, and now trying. "Thank you," I said softly. Amanda raised her glass. "To messy families and finally figuring things out, sort of." Everyone laughed and toasted. The clink of glasses felt light. Free. After dessert, while Jacob and my father discussed replacing the deck boards and Amanda and Daniel were deep in a debate about avocados, Lily stepped outside onto the back patio. I followed a minute later, carrying 2 glasses of wine. She took one, sipped it, and stared out at the sky. "Did you think I'd ever get here?" she asked. "To my backyard or?" "No," she smiled. "To not being a complete disaster." I paused. "I think deep down I always hoped you would. But I had to stop waiting. Had to let go of being the net every time you fell." "I know." She looked down. "And I hated you for it. At first. And now I'm grateful. I still mess up. I still have so much to learn. But the truth is, your silence after the wedding was the loudest wake-up call I've ever had." We stood there for a long while, not saying much, just letting the air between us settle into something new. Later that night, after everyone left and the dishes were stacked in the sink, I sat on the couch with my legs tucked under me, staring at the empty wine glass in my hand. The house was quiet again. Jacob came out from the bedroom, kissed the top of my head, and went to turn off the porch light. As it clicked off, the world outside went dark, but inside I felt more lit than I had in years. Not every wound heals clean. Not every relationship is reborn in the exact shape it started. But some cracks, if they stop bleeding, can still let the light in. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you love? Tell me in the comments below. And if you've ever chosen yourself after years of being the fixer, stay with this channel. You're not alone. And your story matters.